He's been called the Oracle of Omaha, the Sage of Nebraska, and from a young age, he knew he would be rich.
I could figure out when I was 10, if I had a fairly long life, I was going to end up with a lot of money.
He was right. 70 years later, he was the richest man in the world, a tycoon with a rock star aura.
I've never known anyone as focused as he is. It's amazing. He wants to be the best he can be at what he's doing. And what he's doing happens to make a lot of money.
Warren's very young and energetic. Warren is super interested in the latest things going on, and there's so much that you just absorb from Warren's approach to things.
But among all those winning bets, there have also been dramatic brushes with financial disaster.
Both the company and I personally promised Treasury that we would aggressively help them in finding out anything we've done wrong in the past and to make very sure that it doesn't happen in the future.
I was scared. I was scared stiff. There were a lot of people that wanted us to go out of business over that weekend, and I didn't know what was going to happen.
And behind his folksy demeanor, there's one of America's shrewdest and toughest businessmen.
You don't make $40 billion by being Mr. Rogers or by being one of the Muppets. Warren takes no prisoners when it comes to a negotiation. He uses every bit of leverage that he can.
This is going to be one of those days that lingers in the mind.
The Dow was down 200 or 300.
Nobody knows what's in these bundles.
A Category 5 test of our financial life.
It was a terrifying moment in U.S. financial history. In 2008, some of Wall Street's biggest banks and investment firms were about to fail, threatening to take much of the world's economy down with them. Inside the citadels of money and power, desperate calls for help went out to the same person, as dramatized in this HBO TV movie.
We're thinking of reaching out to Warren Buffett.
Great.
You and Buffett go back, right? Do me a favor and call him. Tell him Lehman is rock solid.
During the days that the financial crisis was unfolding, he was viewed as the go-to person. If you're in trouble, Warren Buffett can save you.
For most of his life, Buffett avoided the Wall Street ways of risky speculation. In fact, he stayed far away from Wall Street itself.
Warren really is a product of Omaha, especially in the era that he grew up there. The virtues of modesty, thrift, plain-spokenness, and Warren really exemplifies those.
Warren Buffett still lives and works just a short distance from where he was born in 1930. And it was here in Omaha that he began his obsession with all things financial.
It hit me right away. It was like kids that like to play the piano early or something of the sort. I always liked numbers. I knew I was going to be interested in stocks the rest of my life, but probably at the time I was, 8 or 9. I used to keep charts on all kinds of stocks when I was that age. My aunt gave me a world almanac, so I memorized the population of all cities of any real size. But I just like numbers. It was not limited to business numbers at all.
Buffett also had the uncanny ability to remember all those numbers and how they fit into the big picture, a skill that would be the bedrock of his later success. Former Wall Street analyst Alice Schroeder is the author of The Snowball, Buffett's authorized life story.
Warren grew up in the Great Depression. The family did not have money at all because his father had lost his job as a stockbroker. And so around the dinner table, money was what they talked about.
But Buffett wanted to do more than talk.
My grandfather had a grocery store, and I used to buy Coca-Cola from him in 6-packs for $0.25 and sell them for $0.05 each. I sold the Saturday Evening Post door to door. I sold Ladies' Home Journal. I had all kinds of little ventures, not all hugely successful, I might add. I liked doing business early on.
Journalist Roger Lowenstein wrote an early biography of Warren Buffett.
Then he gets into more exotic things. He collects golf balls. He gets other kids in the block to do that with him. They collect golf balls and resell them. He's picking up stubs at the racetrack when he's 10, 11, 12, because some of them haven't been used yet. He grows up knowing he wants to make money. Investing in business comes later, but it's in him.
Buffett made enough from these ventures to do what, until then, he had only dreamed of doing, playing the stock market.
First stock I bought was City Service Preferred. was a stock that had passed the dividend for how many years, 20 years or something like that. And so it had large accumulated dividends, and it was selling at 38 1/4, and I bought 3 shares. I went all in. That was my entire net worth.
At the same time, Buffett's stockbroker father, Howard Buffett, had won a seat in Congress as a conservative Republican, and in 1943, he took the family to Washington. It was a chance for Warren to start a new business, delivering papers for the Washington Post.
Well, I started with a couple of routes because I was good about delivering papers on time. So then they gave me these absolutely prime routes. Got up to where I was making probably $150 a month or something, which was a lot of money. And I was making it all before I went to school in the morning, so it was good.
Savings from those paper routes became the seed money for his later empire.
I'd made $9,800, and I made most of that delivering papers. I delivered about 500,000 papers, and I made about a penny a piece. So I made about $5,000 for the delivery of papers.
After high school, he was ready to go full-time as a businessman and investor, but his father convinced the 16-year-old Buffett to go to college first. At the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, he roomed with fellow Nebraskan Charles Peterson.
He was very immature. He wore tennis shoes, or if he wore shoes other than that, he had a hard time having them both be the same color. He may have a black and a brown shoe on and never know the difference. Hair messed up.
But Buffett was way ahead when it came to academics.
Every day after class, I'd spend so many hours studying. Warren, on the contrary, picked up the books that were applicable to him and sat there and flipped through them page by page. And he might be through 2 or 3 courses in a couple of weeks. He had a photographic mind. I did not.
And Buffett had a unique way of spending all those hours he did not have to study.
At that time, he was crazy about Al Jolson. And he'd play those records, Mammy, Mammy, how I love you, Mammy, and mimicking it an hour after hour. And then what other songs, at that time was ready to go crazy.
And when he wasn't singing, Buffett was getting his first taste of political activism.
I was president of the Young Republicans Club at the University of Pennsylvania, and I even ran for delegate to the National Convention one time as a Republican.
After breezing through college, Buffett went to interview for Harvard Business School.
I was 19 at the time, and the fellow spent about 10 minutes with me. He said, you better come back again later. It was very clear I just wanted the interview.
After being rejected by Harvard, Buffett set his sights on Columbia's business school, where Wall Street maverick Benjamin Graham was a professor. Graham's investment philosophy was simple, but it defied conventional Wall Street wisdom.
Many people take their cues as to what to do from what the market itself is doing. But Graham would tell you that the market is there to serve you, not to inform you. And basically he was saying the market will be wrong. Now, that flies in the face of what a lot of other people think. But Graham would say that sometimes the market is very, very wrong. And if you look at the prices of stocks as buying pieces of businesses, you will be able to recognize when the market is very wrong.
Graham's way was to find undervalued stocks that were off the radar. And Buffett became his most devoted disciple.
He taught us to find a dollar bill that was going to be, you could buy for 50 cents, but the dollar bill wouldn't necessarily increase in value very fast. And I analogize that to essentially walking down the street looking for cigar butts with one puff left in them, and they weren't very attractive, and there was maybe only one puff in them, but they didn't cost anything.
Armed with the Graham philosophy, Buffett headed back to Omaha to start his own business.
He said, I'm going to form a partnership. And he said, would you want in? I said, sure I do. There was only 7 or 8 people in that original partnership.
Convincing people beyond the first 7 investors got rockier.
My sales pitch wasn't very effective. I was 20 years old. I looked like I was about 16, and I probably behaved like I was about 12. So I would go around and call on people. They were always nice to me. But I would see a Mr. Smith, and I would go through all these facts and figures about why you should buy some stock. And when I got all through, in my head, I would count to 3. I would go 1, 2, 3. And then Mr. Smith would say, "What does your dad think?" And I would always want to hit him. But
it was frustrating. Buffett knew that he had to be a better salesman, so he turned to popular self-help guru Dale Carnegie.
Well, I had to be able to communicate with people better, and I mean in groups particularly. I just knew that I couldn't go through life terrified of public speaking, and I'd heard about the Dale Carnegie course.
And he applied those lessons when he began dating hometown girl Susan Thompson.
I mean, I proposed to my wife during the Dale Carnegie course, so I mean, I got my money's worth right during the course. I had the intellect to succeed, but I did not have the persona. I was not put together as a person until I met her.
Buffett was finally ready to put his career in gear. He was picking stocks that others were ignoring, and his stocks kept going up. Little by little, word spread around Omaha that the kid knew what he was doing.
He's devouring every annual report, and they stay devoured. He remembers them, and he's got these balance sheets in his mind so that if a stock gets cheap, 3 years later, he remembers what the fundamentals of the company are. This is a buy now.
In the first 5 years that Buffett was in business, the Dow rose by 74%, while Buffett's investments had gone up 250%. In 1961, at the age of 30, he reached millionaire status. Friends like Stan Lipsey saw that he was still operating as a one-man band.
His study was right off the bedroom in their house. He wasn't even in an office building at that point. And they had 3 kids. And people joke about Warren not knowing his kids, and that's, of course, a great exaggeration. But the fact of the matter, Susie stabilized the family so that Warren could do the studying that he needed.
His wealth was growing rapidly, but you couldn't tell that from the way the family lived. Their home, which Buffett still lives in, was bought over 50 years ago for $32,000. His children all went to public schools. Susie Buffett is the eldest of 3 Buffett children.
We grew up in a way that I think is probably different than most kids if you've got a dad who has what my dad has. I mean, we didn't get cars when we turned 16. We didn't live any differently, really, than most of the other kids we knew.
The biggest change in the Buffett household was that Warren was moving away from the staunch republicanism of his father.
Civil rights had the biggest effect on changing my views on politics. Neither party necessarily covered themselves with glory on it, but it was clear to me that a basic change, a really basic change in civil rights was called for, and the Democrats seemed to be much more attuned to that than the Republicans.
And Buffett was about to make an even bigger change in his professional life.